Bonjour à tous et toutes et évidemment pour commencer j'aimerais bien d'insister comment je suis connaissant du fait que j'ai été invité de partager cet événement avec vous. Comme Jocelyn a mentionné, je porte deux chapeaux et l'occasion de porter le chapeau d'un historien pour moi est assez rare. L'autre chapeau de président du conseil est plutôt le chapeau qui fait partie de ma vie quotidienne. Mais je veux insister sur mes remerciements in congratulating all of you. And I want to start with Justin, someone who's been a friend of mine depuis toujours, je pense. And it picks up a bit on what he said. I've had occasion to really see how difficult and challenging it is to lead a major initiative in partnership, all those forms to fill out, all those financial documents to put in, all the protocols and on and on. And in our world, in the social science humanities, we don't have a lot of the support that sometimes teams have in certain fields. And we end up doing that a lot of ourselves and getting that all done at the level that you've been able to over the years. It's just been one of the great joys as I've been able to watch that unfold. And I know there's so many people in this room that have contributed so much. And I want to start by saying how proud I am to have the chance to wear that other hat as president of the council to congratulate you all and say how proud we are of the wise investments made over that period. Alors, félicitations. So let's give aussi un mot tout à fait spécial. I know there are lots of friends from around the world here, and I just want to say how thrilled I am to have a chance to see you, and I look forward to chatting some more. I'm able to stay through at least part tomorrow, and I look forward to those exchanges. One of the things, and I'm going to start with that a little bit, is the idea that Canada over the last number of years has built a strong research landscape across Canada that is now engaging internationally in ways that I think is qualitatively different from not that long ago. And I'll just show you one example of that. I went back and looked at some data back to the Canada Council days, and just quickly, all this shows you is that it really is after the 1960s that those who applied for research funding, generally speaking, the majority at least, had their graduate degrees from Canada. And my point is simply that we forget sometimes that it's only been thanks to the Massey Commission, the Canada Council for the Arts, and so on, and then afterwards, that Canada built a strong research landscape. You will see in my presentation today, I'm just going to share a bit on the side that'll put a bit of accent on history. But dès le début, la discipline de l'histoire était au cœur de ça. Et dès le début, histoire était une des disciplines clés, soit au Conseil des Arts ou au Conseil de recherche en sciences humaines. And I think we've got to acknowledge how recent that is, and as many of you know, if you're my generation and you went to a Canadian university to study Canada, I started at McGill. There were 22 profs at the time. 1.5 taught something about Canada. So I know we have colleagues from Australia and other places here, and almost everything was imported and over that time, but it's recent, and I want to emphasize that. And I think now our international engagement is in a very different way than I think back some time. And I think the strength of our ability to engage internationally, I think, is linked to the very solid research landscape that we've been able to create. But, and another aspect of this that I think is interesting is that 55% of all profs teaching in Canada now have been hired since 2000, the year 2000. 55% have been hired since 2000. So, il y a un renouvellement important dans les universités. And I think I want to share with you just a few pieces of that as a way to contribute to our reflection about what's happening on our universities in the practice of history and how we might think about successive projects like Cura and other sorts of projects. We're going to go very, very quickly, and I'm only bringing you some data here because I know at the heart of your project, and I was talking to David earlier and so on, has been an important survey. And you've been trying to come to grips with some of those figures. So let's see. We did un sondage en 2008, et vous avez sans doute répondu. On a envoyé des questions, des sondages à 22 000 profs à travers le Canada dans les sciences humaines, et plus que 6 000 ont répondu, sans doute y compris vous. And I think David will say that that's not bad. Pretty robust sample. And my question, one that I like a lot, asked researchers to self-identify in terms of, did they consider their work very interdisciplinary or very disciplinary? And we gave them 4 choices, from very interdisciplinary to very disciplinary, and in between versions of that. So just give you a little sense, and so, okay, so I'm going to give you 3 groups: sciences sociales, humanité, histoire. We're going to start on the left, très disciplinaire, disciplinaire, interdisciplinaire, très interdisciplinaire. Okay, everyone got the numbers in their head? We'll start with social sciences. Ready? Okay, très disciplinaire, disciplinaire, interdisciplinaire et très interdisciplinaire. Ça, c'est les sciences sociales. Got your numbers for humanité? On y va? I was very surprised. I don't know about you. Pretty interesting. Histoire. Got your numbers? These are robust samples. Intéressant. Alors, this is self-identification. So, I'm very intrigued, and I've had 5 years now of visiting campuses across Canada and engaging internationally. There's deep epistemological, deep changes underway. And I think one of the things that you could help us think through, given all your work, is what do we make of this? And how do we think about this? Pretty fascinating. Now, one answer is we're enlarging our definition of how to advance knowledge and build understanding, how to do research. We're moving from a kind of a specialization. How many times has someone said, I'm doing my thesis, I'm going to fill a gap? And an approach that I think is well established. I think we have other kinds of approaches now. You might think of more multi, maybe, and then obviously interdisciplinary and so on. So I think there's clearly something going on there that I think is really interesting. When we look across the country at the answers to those questions, that I was surprised at as well, les tendances à travers le Canada sont plus ou moins pareilles. Il y a les différences à gauche et à droite, mais en gros, très consistant à travers le Canada. Intéressant. I went back and I looked at all projects funded in history over the years. I told you before that history was a really big discipline at SSHRC, and it's consistently a big difference. I went back to 92. We could have gone back all the way to 1978 when we first started, and maybe in Canada Council. Very interesting. I want to highlight the one at the top The one at the top is something around what we call connection, knowledge mobilization. It's taking the fruits of what we know and moving it out there at various levels. And what this graph shows is that historians are especially oriented toward doing that vis-a-vis other disciplines. And I think that's really interesting, and it's a characterization of ourselves sometimes that maybe we don't have. But it strikes me as a really interesting phenomena in terms of what you're up to. Historians, if you look at the patterns, are very interested in communicating, engaging, and have done that back in the day. So your effort has really been building on a long tradition. Bon. Parlons rapidement des étudiants. And I just took students at the undergraduate level. So here, the Globe and Mail, you may remember, did a very robust survey asking undergraduate students, what do you want to do? Where do you want to work after you finish? Across all disciplines, Google and Apple were the two companies most identified. And what I find fascinating is undergraduate students who most want to work for Google and Apple come from our fields in the social sciences and humanities. Our students are more thinking about an ideal employer at Google and Apple than on the other side of campus. So, pour illustrer le fait qu'il y a les changements intéressants. One of the things I just pick out, Kevin, there are many of you that I could pick out, but I think part of the answer in some of the work that's been going on that you're engaged with is efforts like what he's done in terms of his undergraduate students building apps to visit local historical sites in the Niagara region, responding to. So I think student interest in your kind of engagement, your kind of work, and so on, it makes sense to me when I look at some of that earlier data. Voilà. So you've probably seen me. That data reinforces my sense that our digital era is really composed of a triangle with three sides, in which, yes, there's technologies, but that content and the literacies is really important and so on. And I think so much of your work is feeding into a new era in which our learning about the past, how we think about the past, how we engage the past, and so on, is become so much more diffuse and so on, and it has big implications for what we do on campus, as well as what happens across our institutions and in the larger society. I emphasize this a little bit because I really want to stress the importance of historians in terms of imagining how does digital content affect, what does it mean to be able to look at all of this at the same time. Comme vous savez sans doute, on a lancé des initiatives avec nos partenaires aux États-Unis, en Europe et ailleurs, pour aller de l'avant avec la possibilité de cette initiative. Et les historiens jouent un rôle clé dans tout ça. I also want to put an emphasis on how international our collaborations have come. This is thanks to our colleague Yves Gingras, who's been looking at various sorts of indices. Again, I'll come back to this question, but I think the conversations now that you're having in terms of the international aspects of this initiative and of this imagining about historical consciousness, about thinking about this issue, is part of a much larger, richer international global engagement in the social science humanities, and I think it's worth focusing on. I want to just stress in closing the importance of all this, because let's face it, and Jocelyn, you really emphasize this in your opening comments, and I think it's so important in terms of how we think about the past and how it relates to today. The World Social Science Report that came out last year, put out by the International Social Science Council, but there are other examples, they put their finger on what they viewed as a really kind of a paradox at some level, that on the one hand we have a world that is getting more and more linked, the unifying forces and so on, but at the same time a world that is increasingly divided, and played with all that. And it identified what it considered the major challenges that the world is facing now in terms of the gap between rich and poor, and at the same time climate change, economic growth, sustainable development, life expectancies, growing populations, international exchange, pandemics, and so on. Et dans tous les cas, je pense qu'il n'y a pas de doute que le travail que vous faites est très lié à comment on va adresser, comment on va attaquer ces défis et comment on va faire avancer la société à travers le monde grâce à nos disciplines. You know, it's interesting. People say to me, you know, wow, trying to promote the social science and humanities, that's the hardest thing. You know, those people, those other fields, you know, new gadgets and so on, so it must be a lot easier. And to me, you know, I think, what do we do in the social science and humanities? What do you do as historians? What we're trying to do is understand people, human thought and behavior in the past and in the present. How could that not be at the heart of everything we do? And I think increasingly there is that recognition. And I think if we increasingly articulate the value of engaging in trying to understand human thought and behavior in the past and present, and how it's going to help us move forward as well as in all aspects of our lives, my sense is that the future is bright. We've got some problems. I know you're going to be talking a lot about this. I just had a conversation with Peter Seixas earlier about this. The whole question of how we evaluate, how we measure, how we think about any of these issues. I think there is the lamppost phenomenon going on. It's torturing us in many different ways. We need to really brighten and enlarge and embrace that challenge in much more robust ways. Et je pense que vous avez un rôle clé à jouer dans tout ça, and I know you're working on that. Whether we think about in schools, whether we think about anywhere, so important. Another thing that hobby horse that I think is so important. These are all those mag tapes, very, very important. None of it can be read intelligently. And I just give this example. There are real issues in terms of saving the work you're doing and thinking about that, not just for us today, but for historians of the future and others. And I encourage you in terms of the management of all the fruits of all your work in this project, please do everything you can to ensure that it stands the test of time and is not like so many other bad examples. And finally, back to the great divides, I think my sense is that one of the dangerous aspects of our era is the notion of communities in some level becoming separate and distinct and so on, and the kinds of conversations that you're having that have so many horizontal connections across countries, societies, across time and space, seems to me that's absolutely essential. And I think the work that you're doing is going to help us develop a 21st century that will reflect, I think, better understandings of human beings in the past and present. Grand merci et encore félicitations.